from the writings of Paramhansa Yogananda. And today, on this sunny day on Ananda at Camino Island, I'm bringing you this quotation for contemplation. Your mental attitudes are important. Spiritual progress isn't only a matter of practicing the yoga techniques. Every time you think good thoughts, the Kundalini begins to move upward. Every time you hate people or hold harsh thoughts about them, the Kundalini automatically moves downward. When you love others selflessly or think kind thoughts about them, it moves up the spine. Kundalini is not awakened by techniques alone. Yogananda goes in depth to explain this very important passage of the Bhagavad Gita. That's really the source of this teaching. And I found it very interesting to learn, not being Indian myself, that Yogananda's explanations of the Bhagavad Gita are not the normal explanations that people of Indian descent might hear in their upbringing or adulthood for that matter. Yogananda brought explanations that were in sync with the coming age at the time of Dwapara Yuga, of the second Yuga, the age of energy, knowing that a greater and deeper understanding of the energetic principles behind the physical seeming reality of everything would take precedent, would become better understood. And so this principle about Kundalini rising and diving in the spine, depending on our energetics, on our intentions, on the meaning behind our physical actions, our outward manifestations of things, would become better understood. And for people, there's a couple of ways to look at this. If you struggle with your meditation practice, most people think they're completely alone, that they're the only ones who can't seem to stop the mind, to still the mind to one-pointed focus on God. And they think everybody else is doing that and they're not doing that. But the reality is that it's a very rare soul who is able to do that. Everyone eventually will be able to do that if we simply keep trying, simply keep practicing, as the Hong Sa technique of meditation teaches us. When the mind begins to wander, bring it back. Begins to wander, bring it back. Just keep bringing it back. And eventually, by perseverance, we will succeed. I was going to say win that battle, but the reality is we will succeed because we have to succeed. That's the divine promise for us to all experience that stillness. The voice of God is stillness, that oneness with God. And so we think that we are not very good at this when the mind keeps wandering in our efforts at meditation. And so we're almost ready to give up. And then we hear about this promise in the Bhagavad Gita that it's not by technique alone that we can lift the Kundalini in the spine. It is also by right action. It is by kindness. It is by consideration. It is by compassion. And every time that we behave in that manner in our lives and we have that attitude, that genuine, selfless attitude of kindness in our hearts, the Kundalini automatically rises. And so for the person who might struggle with their meditation, this is a great thought, a lovely promise to consider from that great scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. And in the opposite way, when we know that when we practice unkindness, when we have jealousy, when we have anger, when we have negative emotions, it automatically brings the Kundalini down the spine. And so it gives us pause to understand that whether it's the aphorisms of Patanjali in the teachings of India, or whether it's the Ten Commandments, these are not outward rules or laws. These simply reflect what happens, what takes place in the spine when we behave or think or feel in a certain way. And we understand more deeply then with the inner science of yoga why that takes place, why these are not only moral codes, but they are actually reflections of the inner life. What happens to the energy in the spine? Is it lifted, or does it go downward and outward through our lower chakras, through the, attitudes of anger and jealousy and such, and create only more pain and more karma in our lives, more negative karma, I should say. And so the inspiration of this saying, of this particular quotation from the writings of Yogananda, is to have hope and to understand that even when we struggle with our yoga techniques, with meditation, that we can still, through attitudes, begin to lift that energy in the spine. And then in time, once that energy gets lifted more and more, we find that it also affects our meditation. It offers us deeper, more still meditation, the joy of divine communion. Blessings, and we'll see you again tomorrow with more from the writings of Paramhansa Yogananda.